Who the Wild Things Are with Ryan McGuire.
You gotta listen to your body.
Oh my God, maybe, I could get out there, I could do this.
Let's take a ride, find your wild side, real stories, see with your own eyes.
It's so beautiful.
I'm gonna have the best time out here.
I was in tears. I was just like, that's the best, man.
Welcome back to Who the Wild Things Are. My name is Ryan McGuire, and I'm here to bring you conversations with the most wild folks on the planet. If you're enjoying the podcast, please leave us a rating and review on your podcast platform of choice. And if you enjoyed the episode, share it with a friend. Appreciate you guys. Let's get it going. Hell yeah. Cheers.
Cheers.
All right. This is kind of a new thing. I'm going to do, I don't know, hopefully semi-regular kind of like co-host edition here with Osborne, tackling different topics concerned with all the stuff that we talked about on the pod, things that have to do with the outdoors, general health and wellness, mind, body, soul, kind of just exploring different topics week to week that pique our interest. So thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me.
And we're going to dive in. We're going to talk about the juxtaposition in this room, which is having two best friends, one of which has been a strict vegan for a long time, and one of which has been a hunter and major meat eater for a long time, and kind of see where those paths cross. And it's a topic that comes up quite a bit on the podcast, just like nutrition and ethics and the importance of animal lives. So I'm interested to get your take on it. And I guess just to kick things off, maybe give people a little bit of a background on how your story has weaved from being intensely involved with animal protein to cutting it out and all the spots in between.
Yeah, for sure. So grew up out on a ranch in or a farm, I guess, in Idaho, and hunting all the time. Like that's most of what we ate. We raised sheep and goats that I would butcher for our neighbors, for ourselves, and hunting was how we provided. There was a lot of us, so lots of mouths to feed. Elk and deer, birds. That's like the main source of our protein growing up. And this was something that there was part of me that enjoyed it. It was a way to like connect with my dad and with a lot of guys that I knew out there. And it was also something that just like did not set well with me. Like I did not enjoy it. Okay. It's hard to say that because like there's aspects of like the anticipation, the prep, the stalking, the fun of like being in nature and going out. That's like, I love that shit. But when it comes to like killing an animal, I struggled a lot with that. I remember primarily there was this one season, my last season of hunting, where I didn't realize until halfway through near the end of the season, the scope on my rifle was loose. And so we sighted in, I was like, doing really good. And then come hunting season, and I was finding like great animals, taking a shot, and I would wound an animal or I would straight miss an animal. And because the screws on the scope were loose. And so the whole thing would be like, one day would be shooting right on, one day would be shooting 3 feet to the right.
Sure.
And I was just like, this is not okay. Like I can't do this. And that was basically the last time that I did any hunting of that sort. And then, I wasn't really sure why that was so hard for me. I was still eating meat for years after that. And then finally just came to the place where I was like, wait, I don't know if humans need this, or this source of protein, if this is actually healthy for us, looking at other animals, other big animals that are herbivores that don't eat meat at all.
Right.
And they have plenty of strength and energy, and like looking at some of the, like what animal products do to like our blood and just clouding and different things. So I was like, okay, I'm just going to give this a try. And this was like 4 years ago, roughly. And I was actually living in California at a big community home. There was like 17 of us in the home, and it was a strictly plant-based. I remember there was one day where it was my birthday the following week. I had a carton of eggs that I put in the outside fridge wrapped up in a bag. Somebody found it and like got pretty upset with me. And I was like, okay, this is a whole nother level.
Yeah.
We had like, there'd be days where it'd be like, okay, guys, we got to be quiet because we've got this monk that's coming to interview that we're interviewing in the backyard. He just got arrested because he snuck into a slaughterhouse to rescue a pig. Just like a very far extreme.
Sure.
And so I've just like danced with all of that. And then I was like, okay, I'm just going to see how my body responds to cutting out all animal products. And so I've done that for the last 4 years. And it's honestly, in a lot of ways, has been really healing for me, really healthy. Just seeing like, yeah, it goes through different phases because I felt like there was so much energy that I had, so much health, and just I felt light, felt clean, felt clear. And then coming, I don't know, I guess like you could call for a full circle where I was like, okay, wait a minute. I think there's things that I'm neglecting for my body and also environmentally and just like for the humanity and the animal race. How there is, yeah, I think there's so many different ways of seeing it, and I'm still like deciphering what that feels like to me. But being able to, yeah, it's a natural cycle where we support life, and animals support life, and sometimes that comes from the sacrifice of one life for the fulfillment of another life. And so just navigating that is kind of where I've been coming to.
Yeah. When you think about your decision and lifestyle as a vegan, do you categorize it more as that piece where you're like, I don't want to kill animals or hurt animals anymore? Or do you categorize yourself more in the other camp? Because there's kind of different camps of vegans, right?
Totally.
There's sport and health-based vegans who are doing it because they believe this is the best way to do it. Like there's a lot of ultra runners that are that way. They're plant-based primarily for the effect it has on their body. There's other people that are vegans because they don't want to kill animals and they feel like it's an ethic responsibility, even though they think, you know, meat's really healthy and maybe this is a superior diet to get animal protein. I'm not going to do it because I honor the animal. Where did you see yourself lying between kind of those two camps?
It was kind of a combination because I was recognizing for sure. I was like, whoa, I'm a pretty sensitive guy.
Yeah.
And knowing that an animal had to die for me to eat, I was like, no, that doesn't feel fair. And also for performance reasons. Yeah. Like just seeing like, okay, no, I actually feel really clear and I feel really light and I have the energy that I need coming from plants, which, yeah, just as I was watching that, I was like, oh, wait, so I can eat this living, like I just made this salad from fresh, all of this versus this that was killed maybe a month ago, maybe a week ago, maybe even longer and been in the freezer since then. Sure. Like what is going to give me the vitality that I need?
Did you feel ever like during your, you know, most strict of times being a vegan that you were missing anything nutritionally? Like were there any times where you felt like your diet was not covering all the bases?
You know, not really. I've never been very meticulous with my knowing like my macros or micros. I've always just been like, this is how I feel. I need to eat. I'm hungry.
And you eat a shit ton of food.
I ate a lot of food.
You eat like a ton.
Yeah. And so I definitely noticed, especially starting, it was like, okay, wait, how do I get enough food? So I was just like, basically just eating a shit ton of pasta. Yeah. And then watching just like a lot of different ways of like, okay, so I can do vegan, I can eat enough protein, I can get all these things. And especially now it's so easy. They have so many like fake meats and ultra processed foods. Yeah. And then I was like, okay, so I would vary. Like when I was more grounded in life circumstances, I was able to eat a lot more just like whole foods. Yeah. And that felt really good. But then there'd be times where life would get full or I'd get busy. And then it's like, okay, well, this Beyond Meat is going to be really easy and really simple. And it tastes great.
And it's satiating.
So I would like go to that. And then that's like when I would be like, okay, wait, I'm actually not feeling good. This isn't any better for the environment. And it's not any better for me. That's for sure.
Right.
And so at that point I've always thought when I get to own land or steward land and raise my own animals, that's when things would shift.
Mm-hmm.
And then, I was realizing that I feel ready now.
Yeah. And so you have been experimenting now with bringing meat back in. And I guess the early takeaway of this podcast for people listening is that I think the alienation is in the wrong direction, which is like, are you vegan or are you a carnivore? And it's like, what we should be saying is, are you whole foods based or are you eating mostly processed food? Because I think that's truly, it's the more important question. It's not the only question, but like, at least for me personally, since Nicole and I went whole food, we do a lot of meat, we do fruits and veggies. And that has been more of a change than either being vegan or a meat eater or anything in between, is just avoiding the highly processed diet.
Totally.
And to your point, it's like, you do have to slow life down a little bit. You want to be cooking about 90 to 95% of all your own meals, which is 3 meals a day, if you want to do whole foods. You can't afford to eat out as much. You can't eat on the go. So like life has to slow down a little bit. And that's part of the thing. And there's a lot of temptation and different experiences. Like, you got to be a little bit, you don't have to be super weird at restaurants, but you can just be like, can I have steak and veggies and like chicken and veggies? And there's like, people are kind of like looking at you like, why aren't you having a cheeseburger? And it's, sometimes I'm sure being a vegan, you had to go through like social dogma. Like, I remember even we were at Bickle's house that one time and we had this huge meat, like foray, like there's like brisket and ribs and chicken. And, you came over and we had just ridden bikes and it was like, oh, I'll have like potatoes. And it's like, you have like kind of like these social stigmas that pop up with your food choices, which is interesting.
Totally. And I think it's been on a lot of different spectrums, because like there's I'm not going to eat that, or I'm only going to have the potatoes and a salad at this potluck. And then there's also like I don't know, I was finding that there was like this idea basically of like, oh no, I'm a vegan. And so I'm superior. Right. And I'm not going to eat what you guys are all eating. I'm going to be over here. And it was just like, it felt more separating than bringing together. And
it's kind of like the sober thing.
Yeah.
Like when you're sober, and I'm not saying all sober people are like this, but some people kind of like stick their nose up at people that have alcohol. And it's like, maybe it's a human nature thing. It's like, when we make a decision that we're going to do X, we look down at Y.
Totally.
Even like subconsciously.
Yeah. And I think there was a lot of subconscious that I was living in with that, where I was doing that. And I was like, oh no, I'm this. And I've already agreed to this. And I do really good with like a clear decision. Yeah. Where if I'm like, oh no, I'm not going to like casually drink here every once in a while, like, it's good for me to just draw a line, and like that way I know I'm doing what I need to do. Yeah. But sometimes I take that a little bit too religious, where like I'm like, oh no, I'm vegan, and then I don't know, it can be, especially in other cultures, that can be quite rude, and and just like this idea of like, this is who I am, this is what I do. When I was noticing that there were moments that it was more for that reason than it was actually my current conviction. This is what I need to be doing. Yeah. And I like being like an avid hunter and an avid meat eater. I think compared to most of my peers, I have a lot more respect for vegans than most of them do. They're always like, that's bad. But one of my mentors is fully vegan. He's 67 years old. He's absolutely shredded. He surfs every day. And like, he does a lot of the things in his later years that I want to do. So it's like, I'm looking up to a guy that just happens to be a vegan. So I have to put all that shit behind me, and I can't really sit with like anti-vegan rhetoric because my mentor is literally a vegan. Right. But I have seen him make an exception. We did a sheep slaughter together, and he ate meat. We hadn't eaten in 72 hours, and then we like broke the fast by killing a sheep, and he had meat that day. That's the only time I've ever seen him eat meat in his life. Wow. But he was like, it's just like set and setting, right? Yeah.
It's like we took this
Yeah.
animal's life together. Like we made this like very sacred place and processed it. We're covered in blood together. And, you know, he ate that meat without even like talking about it. I don't even know if he like shared to others in the group that he was vegan. He just was like, obviously I'm going to eat meat in this place. Like,
Yeah.
this is, and there's room for nuance like that. I think that's,
There is.
I think that's okay.
Yeah. Yeah. I was noticing I would get like defensive over the title, where I have friends that would be like, oh yeah, I'm like 84% vegan. I'm like, I don't think it works that way. Like to me, it didn't, because like vegan means I am not touching anything. And so I'd get like annoyed with people being like, oh no, I'm 90%. I'm like, no, that it doesn't work like that.
You just don't eat a lot of meat.
Yeah, exactly.
You're not a vegan.
Yeah,
You just ate chicken nuggets.
for sure. But yeah, and I think something that actually you said to me probably 8 years ago, you're like, the day that I can't kill an animal is the day that I'll stop eating meat.
Vegan. I'll be a vegan.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
always been my saying. And I got that like on a trip. I was like, if there becomes, I think I was killing a fish and I was like, this kind of sucks, because it was like the 4th fish I'd killed that day. And I was just like, you know, alone in the woods. I'm like, I'm having to take all these like, I don't know. Sometimes it sucks killing smaller game and fish or chickens even, because you're like doing a lot of killing versus like a deer. It's like this one really heavy moment and then you have a lot of food. But when you're killing like a lot of animals, like smaller animals, sometimes it gets exhausting. I find that especially with chickens.
Yeah.
And I made that promise to myself. I was like, well, if you can't make this kill, then you don't deserve to eat meat. Like you better not go to a steakhouse, because now you're just outsourcing the murder. And like,
Totally.
you got to be able to sit with that yourself, or you probably shouldn't be eating it.
Yeah.
And I know, to me, that is such bulletproof logic. Like, and I think it makes sense, it seems like, for you. But for a lot of people that I've said that to, it like, I can see it strike this chord with them. They're like, absolutely not. I don't want to know where my food comes from. Like, ignorance is bliss, and I enjoy this disconnection, because I think if they're faced with that consequence, then they would fall into the vegan category, because they wouldn't be able to step up in that time and make the necessary cut to end a life.
Right. And I think, one of the reasons that stuck with me so much is because in that moment, that was like when like right before I had gone vegan, and I was thinking, I was like, I actually don't know if I can do that right now. And that definitely led to me going vegan.
I didn't know that.
Like that stuck with me. Like I still like, I carry that with me, and I'm like, and then coming to now, like the opportunity, like I thought it was going to be once I had land, but I was in Peru last month, and the opportunity came to be a part of like sacrificing this alpaca that was for the whole team for the hike. And I was like, no, this actually feels right. Like this is the time that I want to. And coming, I think it was like just understanding like the cycles of life and how, yes, there is sacrifice. Yes, there is like, there's the willing sacrifice too. And even like watching this alpaca where it's like, it almost just like knows like, no, this is part of my dharma. Like I'm feeding,
this is my mission.
I'm feeding the community right now.
So back up real quick. Let's give folks a little background into like this pilgrimage and the moment in which you're kind of coming back into that meat eating mind frame. Yeah.
I had been just like meditating on, I think it was getting like, you were kind of prepping for hunting season, and I was just like entertaining these thoughts of like coming with you on the hunt. Like I knew it's late in the season, I wouldn't be hunting, but I was just like, it was one day driving home from work where I was just like in this meditative place, and I was like, okay, so would I be able to do this? And how would this affect me? And I'm like, oh, I know for a fact that I'm going to break down bawling when I take this animal's life.
Sure.
And it also feels beautiful. Yeah.
And how did it look with the backpacking trip though? With the llama, and what was like the outlay of that trip?
Yeah. So basically we go for 3 weeks. The first part is a little bit more in like hostels and like yoga retreat space.
And this is like what, 2 months ago? Or a month ago?
A month ago, roughly.
Yeah.
Yeah. And we had a team of 15 to 20 people down there with us, and just staying with these families up in the mountains in Peru, just like the most hospitable family ever. Like there's the Eusebio that like he owns the little village, and it's his like sons and their spouses and just like cousins, and it's just like this really beautiful little place. And they have like basically trout, potato, and alpaca is kind of like the food up there. And yeah, and so I've been there like the last few years, and they would offer alpaca. Actually last year they didn't, but the year before they did. And I was like, okay, well, this is beautiful, but not something I want to be a part of.
Sure.
And then this year, just, I don't know, it felt really like natural and beautiful. And I think that's where it is from, like, I'm killing this animal to feed my need. There's like one side of that, and then there's another side where it's like, no, this is a beautiful exchange of life, of energy, of nutrients. And these alpacas are living kind of a dream life, like up in the mountains in Peru, just absolutely stunning, some of the most beautiful places I've been.
Yeah.
And knowing that they're living a pretty amazing life, they're being treated very well. And so that, I think that makes a big difference for me, like the source of the animal, where the animal comes from. Like that's huge. If it's farm raised, like being like treated poorly, like that's not something I'm on board with. But this is something I can get on board with.
Yeah. Yeah.
Does that answer your question a bit?
It does. And I think what you dug at there was like how important the sourcing is for you. And I kind of feel that same way. When you guys went through the ceremony, was it something that your group carried out, or was it something that the villagers who like own the alpacas carried out?
Very much just the villagers.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
And
I don't think no one else. There may have been one other person from our team that was kind of like watching a little bit, but no, just like the mamitas, like that's they call Eusebio over there to actually like slit the throat, but then they just cover it with a blanket. And this is how they did it this time. They cover it with a blanket, and then they come back in a little while, and it's just like so effortless. Like these mamitas are wearing their white little sweaters and their dresses and just like getting after it, staying perfectly clean somehow. I don't understand that.
Wouldn't be my
and just like utilizing everything. Like they're like right away, this woman runs over here and starts washing all the intestines and like rinsing it all, because that's going to be used for something. And this person is like fixing the hide, because they're going to tan that. Actually, one of the guys from our team is making a drum out of that.
Awesome.
That hide right now.
Very cool.
And just like utilizing everything, and it's just a beautiful process.
Yeah. It's a really heartwarming process, and it instills like hope in me to know that people are still doing that intentionally around the world. Like, I think there's so much that we lose from studying the old ways.
Yeah.
And like understanding that you can create the healthiest food in the world in your backyard with your own community.
Yeah.
The healthiest, whether it's, gardening and growing veggies from the earth, or taking an animal life, hunting, farming, things like that. I think the disconnect comes when we start doing this like factory farm bullshit, right? And the message that I would like to share with people is that factory farming brings you about as close to being as like a processed food vegan as you could be. Because we're just talking about like shoving, whether it's like monocrop agriculture and just blowing over an entire field to get soybeans, or sticking 1 million cows in one little tiny pen. Those are the same energy. That's the same vibration. Growing backyard vegetables or raising a sheep and killing it in a beautiful, harmonious way, those are the same vibration. And it's like, I wish we could separate it like that, instead of separating it as like plants or animals, which kingdom. Instead, I'd like to separate it as like, what is behind the food? How are we preparing it? How are we raising it? Because that's what the important question is.
Yeah.
In my mind.
100%.
So
Yeah, and just to jump back to the offering of this animal, one of the first things they do is they reach in, they grab the heart and like set it on a rock and let like the blood spill to the earth. And just like, I think that's a beautiful symbolism of just like, no, we're offering back to the earth like this blood and just like honoring this animal. I
That's
thought that
beautiful.
was really cool.
What part of the like meat did you eat? Like, what was your? Because was that your first like real meat back? What,
Yeah.
Do you remember what part it was?
You know, I don't. They did a lot of the processing after the kill.
Yeah.
That I didn't get to see.
Sure.
And it was like for the rest of I think there was 6 more days that we were backpacking.
Got it.
And they like put more of that on the horses and.
So they just kind of they carried it through the mountains with you. Did they jerky it or?
No, more like stew meat.
Okay.
A lot of stew, stir fry.
Oh, because it's cold, right?
It's pretty cold.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Because I'm like wondering like how long can it last?
Right. I know. I was kind of curious but also I think it was like the last day or day 5, 6, where there was still like a whole leg, like on the bone, everything.
Did they leave that? They took the hide off though.
They took the hide off right
and
away.
it's just like 1/4 left.
Mm-hmm.
Huh.
Yeah. So I'm not. I think they may have had like a cooler, potentially.
Oh, okay.
I don't. Yeah.
And it's
They do
cool
such an
out, so
amazing
like
job.
you're probably a lot of times like when we would leave, like if you're hanging it on a rack in a butcher shop, like
Right.
the outside kind of hardens up around it, and that's kind of like how you would age it. So as long as it's cold, it'll be just fine.
It was snowing on us a lot, so it's like
Yeah.
it was.
just in the fridge,
Yeah.
habitually. In
We
the
all
fridge.
were in the fridge.
That's awesome. So what's the if you can paint it, what would be your ultimate goal? Would it be like, because I know the killing thing is hard for you, and I know it's hard for a lot of people. Would it be raising like a small family farm style thing, or would it be like, does your mind's eye see you becoming a hunter now that you've kind of opened this door to eating meat? Where do you see it going?
Yeah, I would say actually both of those. I
Both.
definitely would love to have, whether it's sheep, whether it's cows, that I can raise and give them the life that I think they deserve, that they want, and also to be able to feed me, my family, my community. That is definitely a dream. I also see hunting as a really wholesome way of doing that, where these animals that are living up here in these beautiful areas and healthy meat, like none of the medication or anything that a lot of farmed animals will have,
Right.
and just like straight from the source.
Just no antibiotics, no
No
hormones,
exactly.
grass fed, grass finished. And that's
Yeah.
the argument I try to make. I think a lot of people get weirded out because I eat roadkill, and like that sentence for a lot of people is like weird right off the bat. You know, it's like, what
Yeah.
did he just say? It's like, yeah, I eat roadkill. And anybody who's come to my house, like whether it's like, I mean, sometimes roadkill deer, a lot of times are better than ones that you end up shooting because, either you get to them quicker or they die faster or they're a younger animal. Sometimes they taste better.
Mm-hmm.
And here we have the most sought after elk population in the entire country. We have the biggest elk population. We have the most out of state hunters coming here paying over $600 per tag. And it's like, well, I have people in different mountain towns that call me in and I get to go pick those up. Like, I still want to hunt. I still want to be a part of, the 5 or 6 hunts that I do every year.
Yeah.
But I also understand that a lot of these animals, these beautiful, majestic creatures that you're chasing in the woods, have the possibility of getting hit in the head by a Toyota Corolla and laying on the side of the road on a cold day in a refrigerator, like we were talking about,
Yeah.
and just being on the side of the road. And people are instantly like, ew, I would never touch that.
Right.
It touched the road. But I'm like, oh, you don't know what meat you're eating.
Exactly.
You're very confused right now by what is on your dinner plate.
Like, no,
Because-
this came in a package.
No,
like in a
it's
pretty package. It was clean.
It was in cellophane. It's clean. Yours is on the road. And I'm like, well, yours went through a meat grinder. And
Yeah.
mine has been living a majestic life in the Rocky Mountains. And there's so much mental gymnastics that we do about meat. and there's not enough conversations discussing it. I hope no one else picks up roadkill because I hope I get it. But it's just another example that I find similar to the "if I can't make the kill" statement.
Yeah.
People kind of cringe when I say that thing. People cringe when I say anything about roadkill. It's
For
like,
sure.
It just like strikes.
It's a
us
separation
nervous.
where like they see their dish on their dinner table as something very different than whether it's an animal running around or whether it's an animal laying on the side of the road or whether it's an animal in a factory. Like there's just a big separation, which, yeah, I think is I don't know, a lot of our country and world's issues is that separation. Not necessarily just with meat, but whether it's like, oh, those people in North Carolina that are having this hurricane right now, there's that separation. That's not affecting my day-to-day life.
Right.
But these people over here, they are being majorly affected by this hurricane.
Sure.
And whether that's some other country that's going through all kinds of war and horrible things, like we do a really good job of separating.
Yeah.
Like, oh, that's not affecting me. That person's child just got kidnapped, but that doesn't affect me because it's not my child.
Right.
Or it's not my friend's child. Where I think there can be a lot of like, yeah, that's, I guess, part of my desire in life is to help bring more of a connection and more of a togetherness where it's like, no, your child is missing. That cannot be the same as my child missing because we are the same.
Right. And I think in order to get there, you have to bring back community living, which I think is something that you and I talk about a lot, which is the way to proper prioritization for all of us, me included, you included, anybody, is to live in like extremely close community with a smaller band of humans. And I think on the flip side of that, the way to have really fucked up priorities is to have this massive nation of people and like blame everything on whether Trump or Kamala gets elected. And it's like, okay, here's a weird thing. All of our parents, not all of our parents, but that generation will sit there on Fox News all day, clicking away, listening to all these problems that probably don't affect their life. But then if you ask them about what they're putting in their body, the most impactful thing, or their movement, it's like, oh, no, that's not a priority. Did you hear what they said about abortion? Did you hear what they said about smoking weed? Did you hear about what they said about the border? And it's like, sure, like that's all important, but like, what is that doing for you today? Like what matters today is like, how much sunlight did you get? What did you eat? And how much did you move your body? Like those are like tangible things, but like those aren't important. What's important is the border. What's important, it's like,
Totally.
it's just this like flipped mindset of like, the government is what matters, and we've lost this focus on the presence of where you are physically and what matters today. Like this is what matters.
It's taking ownership for what you can control.
Exactly.
Because also the separation of like, oh, Mr. President is going to make the best decision for everyone way over here. He doesn't know anything about the people over here.
Nor does he give a fuck.
No.
It's like,
but like, these are my neighbors.
Right.
This is my family. How can I step into ownership of like, oh, what am I going to put in my body? How am I going to move myself? How am I going to
show up for the guy next to me?
Right.
Yeah. It's an important thought. And it's something that's like, it sounds woo woo, but it's actually not. It's kind of the opposite. Actually, it's like very tangible. It's like, what can I do right now in this moment? Maybe you're listening to this podcast in the car. What can I do right now to make somebody in my community's life easier? How can I support them?
Yeah.
Well, one, you can make personal choices for yourself, eating good, moving your body, taking care of yourself. And then you can go out of your way and help somebody whose kid is missing, help someone whose dog is sick. Like those are the tangible things that matter. Getting on Facebook and like rage baiting about Trump, not going to do it.
No.
It's not the things that are going to make a tangible difference in your life.
Okay. So I'm curious, talking about like the separation thing, because I think that's a very natural piece, is like we are separated from a lot that's going on. How do we use that, taking ownership and sovereignty in our life, and still recognize that there is separation, and how to eliminate separation?
I don't think that you can on a world scale.
Okay.
I think and that's why I think the idea of a community is so important, is because, throughout human history, let's say the last 4,000 years, unless you're at war, you were never concerned with what somebody across the pond was doing. You were just concerned about your village. And that's the way that we adapted and got to this place. Now we have this thing where like we're all disconnected because we have this thing in our hand that allows us to see everybody and all of their differences and allow us no longer to look at the person that's in your household. You don't even have to look at them. You can just look at your phone all day.
Yeah.
You can laugh at messages to each other while you're in the bedroom and they're in the kitchen, like just completely disconnected. So I think that's part of it, is like we're not meant to be connected to everyone in the world. We're meant to be connected in community. There's a bit in, I think it's in Sapiens, where they talk about how many people a human being can handle. Like you can only, it was something to the effect of you can only have like 200 close individuals in your life, like period. Like whether you're the president or whatever, like our brains and bodies are not designed to hold space for, the entire country. There's 300 million people. There has to be separation, right?
Totally.
So it's just like, if everyone can focus more on their community, I think that would be my answer. But I'm curious to hear yours. Is there a way to improve that like global consciousness?
Yeah, I mean, I think you hit it spot on, where it's like the way for that global consciousness is the local consciousness, and is my consciousness and the way that I operate in my small community.
Yeah.
I think that's the way it has to be. And that trust that I'm going to do it here, you're going to do it there.
Right.
They're going to do it there.
And that's how it's going to get taken care of.
Yeah.
That's the only vision I can see, unless there's like some kind of tech where, you have like brain implants and everyone gets like interconnected immediately. That would be like the only way I could see it scaling to that level. But I don't think,
that's
I
not
don't
my
know.
choice.
I'm too scared for any of that shit. I'm out.
For real.
I'm out. Yeah. Sounds terrifying to me. I'm good on that.
Yeah.
The other piece that I wanted to bring up with the hunting thing was like, there's this idea about hunters. We've talked a lot about the ideas of vegans, but there's this idea of hunters that they're like just a bunch of rednecks, like out fucking shooting animals in the butt and watching them run off while they're drinking Budweiser. And it's like, I definitely think those people exist.
For sure.
Like, I don't think it's the same way where like people try to paint it like, oh, if you're on welfare, you're just like having a bunch of babies and smoking cigarettes. Like, sure, they exist, but there's also people on welfare that like need help because they're in a sticky spot. Yeah. And I think this like picture of the hunter is the guy like that kills Bambi, and he's just like a redneck and he's just out there shooting whatever he can shoot. And truthfully, I think we're at the point where that is further from the truth than ever before. All of the people, no, I shouldn't say all, 95% of the environmentally conscious wilderness caretakers that I know are hunters. There are some people, some wilderness guides I know, that don't hunt or fish. So I would say they were maybe like that 5%. But the other 95% of people who are stewards to the land that I know, harvest food from the land. And I just think it's appropriate to give a voice to that. So folks that maybe I didn't grow up hunting like you did. I got into making bows and weaponry all on my own, no advice, nobody telling me what to do at first. Literally just cutting down trees and trying to make bows and arrows. And it was just because I wanted to get my own meat. I was like, I want to be as close to the meat as possible. Yeah. And through that, I found some mentors and some friends and some people with similar interests, and I realized that they were all stewards of the land. They weren't what I thought. They weren't the hillbilly in Indiana, just like, piss off and shoot stuff and chase deer in trucks and those kind of people.
Right. And I think that's a fun point, because that is the taking stewardship of yourself and of your land and of your community, where there's something very powerful about having a weapon that can take another's life and to choose to take a animal's life. And so I think anytime there's that sort of power, there can be the distortion with that power being like, oh, now I'm all this and I can And I think that's kind of for myself as well, where it's like, yeah, that's a Budweiser and the running around in the trucks and like shooting whatever, where that's a source of power, but power held in a good way is like, no, I'm actually very, very protective of my land because I don't want this person that we're talking about to be over there running around shooting whatever. And it's like, no, and part of stewarding that land does mean I can take the life of an animal.
Yeah.
And does mean that but I'm going to do that in a really honoring way and like actually stewarding that and using the power that I have taken to better community, to better myself, to better.
It's not even just like theoretical power. It's also like dollar power. So like every dollar, I think it's like 10%, the Pittman-Robertson Act that was approved by Congress, like 10% of every weapon that's sold gets put into wildlife conservation. And then you look at the amount of money coming in, like out-of-state tickets here, in-state it's $60 for an elk tag. It's like 10 to 20% during archery for success. It's extremely hard. Then $600 a tag for out-of-states. So think about the amount of revenue we're generating. All of that going to CPW to protect parks and wildlife.
Yeah.
And so when I have folks like with anti-hunter rhetoric, I'm like, well, then you are using your dollar to vote against conservation. And you and if that's where you stand, that's fine, but you have to be pro defund the parks. You have to be pro defund wildlife management. And if that's where you stand, you're like, that's okay, and I still hate hunting, then okay, so it's the same thing as defund the police. You're like, I hate the police and I want to defund them. I'm accepting that my house is going to maybe get broken into or it will be a more dangerous place, but I hate the police that much that I still think we should defund them. That's that same kind of argument, right? It's like,
yeah,
and you can be on either side, but you have to understand that you're voting your dollars away from conservation when you're voting against selling tags. That's just, there's no other way around that.
Yeah. Okay, so that's interesting because I wasn't aware of that. And I feel like over the last few years in like my mindset of coming from like, no, that doesn't have to happen. It doesn't have to be the death of another being for me to eat. Like, I feel like there would be a lot of arguments for that.
Sure.
Where it's like, okay, so yes, maybe the ticket selling is like the majority or the biggest or the only way of funding these things. And there should be another way as well.
Yeah. And that would be great. And I would love for that to happen.
Yeah.
I want all of the money to go into wildlife management. I'm pretty much like a single issue voter in terms of like all politics. I'm like, who's going to take care of the land? Like, how do we clean up the streams? How do we protect the most public land? Like, it's all I care about in my life. Like, not everyone's like me. That's fine. I haven't seen a fiscally realistic way to do that.
Right.
Other than really hunting organizations.
Okay.
They're the ones who are like outside of, and I don't have stats to back this one up, but we could look it up after. I would bet that outside of ticket sales from hunters, private parties, the largest nonprofit Colorado conservation nonprofit organizations are hunters. I bet it's hunter organizations.
Okay.
For example, like Howl for Wildlife is another one. And this is a very hot button topic right now in Colorado. I don't know how familiar you've seen this, but basically this year on the ballot, there is this initiative to ban mountain lion hunting. And it fires a lot of people up.
I can imagine.
Yeah. Have a deep connection with mountain lions, and we can get into that in another podcast. And I have so much love for them, and I'm pro mountain lion hunting. In Colorado, very few mountain lions get killed by hunters, but it does happen. You have to process the animal to eat. A lot of people eat mountain lion. The public doesn't know that, so it feels like trophy hunting. Mountain lion's a very good eating animal, and you must eat the animal. So there is no like this word trophy hunting. Like, no, you're killing a mountain lion to eat it. Mountain lions will eat your children. That's just straight up. They will eat a small child. They will eat your dog. I've seen them take 2 of my family's dogs. They are unbelievably beautiful, capable animals that will fucking destroy things. If not kept in check, particularly toms. So the big old males, be 180 pounds. Like, they'll snatch up a golden retriever like it's a Dorito, right? And so I think there's a couple points there. One, I think people are disconnected with what a mountain lion is because they've never encountered one in the wild. Mm-hmm. 2, I think people think that mountain lion hunting is sport hunting.
Right.
And lastly, I think people don't realize that if they vote away mountain lion hunting, they think that mountain lions are no longer going to get killed. Right? This is what Californians thought. And so California voted against it. You cannot kill a lion in California. So you know who does all the killing? The state does it now. Same amount of lions get killed. The state kills all of them. They choose which ones to kill. They kill them. So you pay taxes in California. You pay for these guys to go kill them. So not only are you not getting dollars for conservation through somebody having to buy the ticket.
Right. You're
now paying a government agency to go kill those same lions. Same quota. The quota doesn't change because the quota comes from the wildlife biologist. Mm-hmm. And so that's what would happen. It's not like, oh, our management strategy is going to change because we're not allowing people to hunt lions anymore.
Right.
It's just going to be carried out by the government.
Yeah.
So now you're not getting to sell, because you sell crazy amounts of tags and only 5 to 10% probably are successful on a mountain lion.
Totally.
It's a super small number.
And also I imagine these management groups are not going out and processing and eating the meat. Maybe they are. Who knows?
Who knows? But, probably a lower percentage than one of our neighbors who's like lifelong mission is to go out and, kill a beautiful beast and take it home and eat it with his family.
Right.
But, you'll have folks that are super down to go to Whole Foods. Yeah. Whip up that steak. It's totally fine, but don't kill my mountain lion.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying that everyone has to agree with me. I'm sure there's somebody could steel man the other side of it and argue for it a lot better than I could. But, I just think it's a really dangerous way of thinking when we want to entrust all of the wildlife management into the government's hands and no longer involve our communities in upkeeping these habitats. Because who's going to protect that lion's community? The guy who's hunting the lions.
Yeah.
He's going to be like, no, that's lion habitat. This is where I hunt. Like, you're not building anything there. We're not going to litter here. Like, this is like pristine habitat. Like, hunters are the guys that are going to be in there. I feel like folks that are against lion hunting are probably going to be scared that there's lions in there and they're not going to want to go in there.
So true.
I don't know if you have any feelings about, because I feel like definitely vegans, and I could be wrong about this, see some animals as unhuntable, while other animals maybe are more okay to take. Mm-hmm. Like there's a certain like majestic status that some animals have. Do you agree with that?
I would, yeah. Yeah, and I think that's in just like the scarcity of this animal, potentially. Like when I see a beautiful bull moose, I'm like, please don't touch that.
Yeah.
Like I want to look at that. I want anyone else to look at that. And something that's not, but then again, yeah, when it's deer or something like that, that has been, I don't know, in Idaho, we had both the wolves and the deer. Like the deer there were so many deer that there was like the sickness that came in and killed wild numbers of deer. Mm-hmm. And then there was deer dead everywhere. And the whole state, like there was this stench. And that was because they were population was out of control. Mm-hmm. And so, yeah, something like that, I'm like, no, I can see how this is actually benefiting, and especially if that's money going towards conservation and towards protection and all of these things, and we're bringing more of a balance into the population, like that's a positive thing. Mm-hmm. So yeah, I guess I do see that though.
It's funny you said that because I'd never like internalized it until you just said that. But I do feel that way about moose for whatever reason, and this is a good time to reflect on my own ignorance as well as the importance of like state biologists, which is for me, except for when I ran the Collegiate West this year and I saw 4 in one day. I've seen moose like I can count it on 2 hands in my lifetime.
Yeah,
I've seen 50,000 deer.
for sure.
You know, like unbelievable amounts. But like I've seen moose 10 times in my life.
Yeah.
And yeah, so even my mindset is like, oh God, I have a moose on my wall. Like I'm like, I have like a picture of a moose. I'm like, I have no interest when I look at it of hunting that animal. I just want it to like live. And
Right.
like I'm glad it exists. And I'm the same way with mountain lions. Like I've never hunted a mountain lion. I don't really have like, if I had a like really good opportunity with somebody who was really well versed in it and it was their, like a lot of mountain lion hunters are mountain lion hunters. They're like very focused on it. And if I had an opportunity, I would be open to exploring it, but I'm just glad they exist.
Yeah.
I want them to continue to exist in, you know, some kind of harmony with everything else. And I just feel like we need to study them. And in order to protect that habitat, we need dollars. You know, how hard is it for you and I to part with money? It's hard. It's hard to spend money on things. How likely are we to just go online on a Tuesday and be like, I want to give money to the wilderness? Like, how often do you do that? I've never done it in my life. And it's not the reality. Like, nobody just gets online like, money for the trees. You know, it just doesn't happen.
Right.
So we have to find out of like a solid way to do that. And hunting seems to be something that at least, maybe it's not the best way, but at least has a proven track record. Mm-hmm. And that's, that's kind of my case for it.
I like that.
I think even if like you're vegan, it's hard to be anti-hunting, you know, because vegans care so strongly about the animal, which in order to caretake the animal, you have to caretake the habitat first and foremost. And the way that habitat gets protected is through hunters. Mm-hmm. So there really should be like a synergy there. Those two groups should be more connected than your average mindless meat eater.
Right. And I mean, there's such a fucking spectrum in the plant-based vegan community worlds. I feel for myself, I feel like I was raised with a balance, you know, even though, my family thought I was weird. Like, wait, you're not going to have this elk burger? There was a time where I wouldn't. And, but kind of understanding both sides. And so I always saw like, they are important and there's a balance. You can't have everyone drinking almond milk and nobody drinking cow milk, but you also can't have whatever people have to be passionate about what they're passionate about. Yeah. And I think that's what brings this energy.
Sure.
Oftentimes. But I would say there's definitely people that wouldn't get on board with hunting at all as a vegan because it's like they don't, but it's from my perspective, it would be an uneducated perspective.
Because they
don't understand the balance
of
that
hunting.
Actually, right.
Yeah. And that is hunters' faults. Yeah. That is that's nobody else's fault except for like the hunting community is that, okay, well, you guys just haven't done a good job of articulating what this is. The media that you've peddled out has been focused on the 50-year-old guy and getting him his cool camo, which is, you know, whatever. Like, who fucking cares about hunting companies are so gear focused, which is one of my biggest complaints about them. It's such horseshit. It's almost all horseshit. Some people are gonna get mad about this rant here. Like, that's where all their media goes into like, here's the new camo, real tree camo. Like, the deer's not gonna see. I'm like, they can't fucking see. They can't see for shit. They're gonna smell you, dog. But it's just like, that's where they focused all their media instead of focusing a lot more media on the importance of hunting.
Sure.
And I'm sure that's because how much money do they make from educating people, right? It's probably not very much. But like, there are good groups out there. Like, I think Meat Eater has done some good job of like making one of their core foundations conservation.
Okay.
And like being like, we are a conservation company. Yeah. They do this Meat Eater has a podcast. It's a guy named Steve Ranella. I don't know if you probably never heard of it because you've been a vegan for a
I've
while.
heard the name, but
Okay.
I feel like it was from you.
Oh, probably. But they have Meat Eater trivia. So every
Okay.
other episode of their podcast is a trivia thing. And they're a bunch of like really well-educated like conservationists or fishing or hunting guides. Like they've all got a background. They're all published authors and shit. So they're pretty good. Like I lose a lot.
Yeah.
And $500 from every single game. Like whoever wins gets to donate $500 to the conservation effort of their choice. And it's all
Okay.
like focused on donating money to, you know, protecting this wildland. Lately, they've been doing, a couple people have donated to the Colorado effort to defend mountain lion hunting.
Okay.
So they've been like really harping on it like a lot.
Yeah.
So I think there are companies, I don't want to blanket every hunting company and say they're all trash.
Right.
But, I think the lack of education ultimately falls on us, me included, as hunters. And that's why these conversations are important, I think. So
Yeah. I feel like I have more to think about on the I don't think I understood the balance of like the tickets from these and like purchasing a tag and all of the way that it networks together. So yeah, in some ways beautifully. And I'm sure there's distortion in that as well. Like
for sure.
there is in most things, but
Yeah, anything that the government's doing, there's probably waste and error and all those
Yeah.
kinds of things. But yeah, it's beautiful. And I'm glad that that you're starting to eat meat a little bit, because now we get to experiment with some different animals.
absolutely.
Maybe we should go downstairs and eat some roadkill deer.
Hunting is some like next season whenever it comes. That is something I'm definitely interested in. And I've always thought, I'm curious like why you go archery. I think I understand, and I know for myself like where I want to be with that.
Yeah.
But I'm just curious your take on that.
Yeah. No, it's a great question. So generally when you're hunting an ungulate, a hoofed animal, so deer and elk primarily here in Colorado, you can choose to do archery, you can choose to do rifle, and those are kind of like the two main intersections. So the advantage to archery is you get to start earlier. You get to start in September. And so you get the first crack at it before all the guys with the guns get out there and run around. It's especially important for elk because the elk are rutting in September. The mule
Okay.
deer rut a little bit later, but rut means they get all horny and they try and have sex. So when they're all occupied on that, it makes them move around a lot and have this crazy aggressive behavior. And that's when you get into like the epitome of elk hunting in Colorado, which is like this sacred thing, like this bugle, and he's screaming. He's like, "Arr!" He's screaming. And then you see like a hunter have an opportunity to get close enough to kill him with a bow, right? You have to be far closer with a bow. Now I do something called traditional bow hunting, which is like even a step down. So I use just a piece of wood that I made with a string that I made, arrows that I make, and try and get super close to the animal. So for reference, you can shoot, an average person could shoot 400 to 500 yards away with a rifle.
Yeah.
An individual could shoot, on the highest end, maybe 70 yards, but most people like 40 to 70 yards with a compound bow. And then with a traditional bow, most people want to be inside of 20 yards. And so for me, the most beautiful primal way to interact with the animal is traditional bow hunting. Like this year, just getting within 20 yards of an animal inside of their house, like it takes so much presence and preparation. And you have to also remember that all of this requires an extreme level of fitness, right? I'm hiking solo, carrying my camp on my bag at 10,500 feet, going up to where these deer are, trying to not spook them, constantly checking the wind. It's one of the hardest things you can ever do is to hunt.
Keeping your heart rate down so that you can be still
so you
enough
can
to
make
take a
the shot. Exactly. So it's it might be the hardest thing in the world is to hunt mule deer with a traditional bow. Like it's unbelievably hard.
Yeah.
And that's part of why I love it.
Yeah.
Now, the last couple years, I've had a mentor that has opened this door for me of rifle hunting as well. And for me, at the beginning, I was like, ugh, rifle hunting, ugh, no. I'm a bow hunter, no. I'm a mountain man, no. And then as I thought about it, I'm like, you're just mini outsourcing the killing, like we were talking about earlier. It's like I have what it takes, and it's not a huge financial obligation to hunt in state with a rifle. Like you buy a rifle once, you buy ammo, and then your success is much higher than the archery. So it's actually a better bang for your buck. I'm like, I could get a couple more animals because I can get archery tag and then I can get a rifle tag after. So I have another archery hunt next and then a rifle tag after that for elk again. So I'm just increasing my chances.
Yeah.
One, because there's more opportunities, and two, the chance of killing is higher with a rifle.
Right.
You can also make the efficacy argument. I've hit animals with my trad bow and lost them. And it's a fucking heartbreaking, make you want to cry situation. Like, it gives me chills every time I even say that sentence. And it sucks. And it's less likely with a rifle. Mm-hmm. You're more likely to put an animal down right away with a quick death. Now, with that said, if you are a responsible bow hunter, you can put an animal down extremely efficiently. You know, people want to make arguments about that, but it's like, I practice all year round. I have equipment that I'm extremely comfortable with. I'm constantly refining my game. And if you are somebody that's putting that attention in as a bow hunter, you can make an extremely swift, deadly kill, and that animal won't even know it happened.
Right.
It'll just be like, what was that? Dead, right? And it's like much quicker than anything that could ever happen in nature. People think that animals just like fall over and die in the woods. No, like they get attacked by coyotes, they rip out their asshole and eat them from the inside with all their innards hanging out. It's the most brutal thing in the world.
Right.
And people have this idea like, no, that animal's going to die. It's like, that animal will die. It'll either starve and freeze to death, a very slow, miserable, painful death with its internal organs shutting down, or it's going to get torn apart by little dogs and they're just going to pull it from the inside out. Like, it's going to be brutal. Like, the best thing that could happen to that animal is, Tink, what was that? Oh, I'm dead. Like that, right? That's as beautiful as it gets.
Yeah.
So yeah, there's a lot of that built in there, but yeah, that's the long and the short of my reason for both archery hunting and now starting to adopt the rifle hunting. If you have rifle hunting questions, don't ask me, because I don't know the answer. Yeah, I'm still learning.
Sounds good.
But yeah, but you're interested in trad archery, like traditional archery.
Yeah.
And I have a feeling that both of you and I, and part of our connection, it involves the making, right? Totally. The reason we want to be traditional archers is because we're making things from the earth, right? Mm-hmm. We have this connection with this weapon where it's like, you know, I polished it and I made this cut here and it's got this little knot and I cut it here, and there's like hours and hours of work put into developing this and tinkering with it and correcting it and getting to know it, versus a plastic mold injector spitting a, you know, $2,000 Hoyt bow off the line, and it's just like one of a million bows. And there's nothing wrong with compound archery, right? It's just not my feng shui.
Yeah, for sure.
And that's fine.
And I feel like there's also a piece with that. I haven't made the kill in a very long time, you know? And so I think being with a traditional bow and being able to, like, I want to be able to see the deer. I want to be able to look in his face.
Oh yeah, you're
and like
you will be,
and decide then.
Yeah,
and also like be like, yes, this is what I'm doing. Yes, this is what I feel good about. And also there's a high possibility, or there's the possibility that I'm there with the shot. Like, no, not today.
Yeah, I had that with my first shot ever on a doe was from media. It's from 3 yards. So I'm like drawing my arrows like if I would have lunged for it, I could have hit it. Yeah, and it just had this tiny fawn with it. And it was like I was in a ground bind. It was my first time with the shot. And I was like, oh, I can't. And I just slowly released it back down and just let it walk. Because I was like, literally, this spot where you're hunting is like super coyote heavy. There's a bunch of farm fields around it. And they like yip all night, every night, especially when they're like killing fawns. And I was just like, I don't wanna. And I just like passed, and it was fine. And I was like, there will be other deer. Like,
for sure.
I don't want to kill this one.
And I feel like there's something with that for me. Like, whether it's like going to pick a flower, like I'm I'm weird. I talk to the flower. I ask the flower if it wants me to pick it first. And sometimes yes, sometimes no.
Yeah.
And I feel like it would be the same thing with a deer, whether it's like, is this one, do you want to go home with me? Do you want to support my family right now?
Right.
Or no? Both are okay.
And I've always brought this up to my vegan friends, which is like, oh, like, you know, they're like relatively animist, meaning like they think there's life in everything. Like a lot of vegans are like, that plant is alive. And I'm like, okay, I agree. I think the trees are a different type of intelligence. I think they can do things. They can support each other in ways. They can pass nutrients around. They can move, right? They're on a different time scale, but I believe they have some sort of intelligence. So you're saying, I will never kill an animal. I'm against all killing of animals, but I will completely rake an entire field of crops and I will never think twice about it. Yeah. And it's like, okay, well, now we're agreeing that there is still a hierarchy and like you're down to kill them and not them.
Yeah.
Right. And you have to sit with that and be like, okay, I'm okay with that choice. And if that's the case, then that's fine. Like, okay, plants aren't important and animals are. And that's where you sit. Totally fine. But I feel like that thought exercise gives people a little bit of, they have to double take at it for a minute.
For sure.
Because they're like, damn, I do like think of a relationship with these plants. But then I murder all of them.
Yeah.
But I want to keep the animals. Yeah, so and I think a lot of this is stuff that you and I think about, and a lot of people would rather just not think about any of it.
For sure. No one wants to murder their head of lettuce.
I just don't want to. I don't want to think about murdering anything.
For sure.
But I think they're important conversations.
Yeah.
Well, I think this is a beautiful way to kick off our new series.
Absolutely.
And still got to think of a name for it. What do you think? Chats with Osborne?
I feel like it could.
Overtime with Osborne.
I
I don't know. We'll workshop
We'll figure it out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Till next time, guys. Stay wild.
All right.